Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths of marketing with some of the world's most experienced marketing professionals. And my guest today is Jason Mundy, a fractional CMO with experience as a CMO for smaller companies like Van Taka and a SaaS fintech company, as well as senior marketing roles with large companies like Dell and EMC. Jason, welcome to the show. Glad to have you back on the show, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you, David, and thanks for having me back. Looking
Sure,
forward to
yeah. Really enjoyed our last conversation, and you and I have continued the conversation about some interesting topics. And we've been talking about using AI in marketing as most people in the world are doing. And I think, we've both seen a lot of potential in what we could do with AI and what people can do, but it also seems like organizations are struggling to create the process and systems to use it consistently and effectively. And you've done a lot of work in the area of change management. And I'm curious as to how you think about change management processes and how it relates to this new opportunity to use AI. How are you seeing that work together?
Yeah, certainly. AI it's new. It's not unlike the early days of social media where we didn't really understand the implications of it. And it's really like implementing any new technology or like enterprise technology into our organization, whether it's marketing automation, or it's an accounting system. And so it's really good to employ best practices for change management and kind of think about it like that. The only difference I would say is AI is it's moving at such an accelerated pace, right? We see it on a weekly basis, a daily basis, and there's so many possibilities with it. So it's moving faster than anything. But again, it's really a systematic change to the organization, and it has significant implications in terms of impacting people's lives, impacting jobs, impacting roles, and everybody is trying to figure it out. But if you kind of take a cool, calm, and calculated approach, as if you were, rolling out any sort of enterprise software, I think you can be successful with it. And so there are some key things, some key fundamentals. It's really, the first thing, and some of this is just obvious, right? Having a clear AI strategy, right? You don't want to just kind of go out there and have it be the Wild West within your organization, right? Because that's when bad things could happen. You want to start small and prioritize. You obviously want to implement a phased approach, and training and upskilling for the marketing organization is obviously critical. You want to make sure everybody has the right skills. And one of the most important things, though, is to really invest in and put some time into having a robust change management program. I think that's the most important thing, is to manage that well, right? So that you don't have unexpected negative results. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. You want to make sure that you're not trying to throw away the baby with the bathwater in terms of, trying to automate everything, and losing that human touch and experience, right? Which is absolutely critical. And then having strong governance and guidelines, putting guardrails in place for the organization, and what they can and cannot do is absolutely critical. I think we saw that as I alluded to the early days of social media, right? People didn't really know. They're posting, inappropriate things, personal things, maybe talking about politics, right? Can be very damaging to a company. So you want to make sure that you make it very clear and it's not unambiguous, right? For what can and should not be done. You want to set KPIs. You want to have goals, OKRs, and KPIs. And measuring performance is absolutely critical. And you really want to, this is about innovation. You want to foster a culture of innovation. You want to have a safe environment where people can experiment with it. Now, I'll pause there for a moment, but I want to kind of go into change management, like how do you manage that? Because that I think is the most critical aspect, is like how do you overcome any resistance to change and make sure that your team and the organization is successful.
Yeah, you've said a lot there, and I think we're going to dive into each of those areas in a little bit of detail. But let's just take a little bit of a step back and talk about the why. So, the why are organizations kind of doing this, and maybe the why of the change management. I want to focus on that, not necessarily why AI. So, but what are the risks that you see of kind of moving into AI and AI practices and AI innovation without a significant change management structured process? Sorry, did I cut out there for a second?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, if you allow it to be, yeah, there's a little bit of a hiccup there. You've got a little bit of a delay.
That's all right. All right, let's we can just continue. We'll just cut that part out.
Yeah, I think it's good now. Um, as I mentioned, if it's the Wild West and everybody is just you just kind of try to automate everything and apply it to everything, um, there's a risk that you really lose. First of all, you could have you could there's hallucinations obviously in AI. There's bias that can be implicit in it. You could have really bad results. You could have copyright infringements. You could be putting out information that's incorrect, right? That can be really damaging to the reputation of the company. But I think most importantly, the impact that it could have on the morale of the employees. There's a lot of resistance to this, even though everybody is excited about AI. People are worried: is this going to take away my job? Is this going to render what I do not as valuable? Right? Is this going to change my job in a significant way? And especially with more junior level employees where they're focused on more of the tactical, action oriented responsibilities, where AI is going to have a greater impact. And so, what you don't want to do is to say, hey, we're going to automate everything and have negative impacts not only to potentially the company, to your customers, but to the people in your organization and morale. So you have to be very cautious about it. You have to experiment. You have to see what works, and you have to modify that. And you have to always make sure that you have that human element and you have checks and balances in place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you've got there's risks involved, but you want to take advantage of the opportunities. And like you said, this is similar to adopting other technologies. So talk about some of the strategies and change management that you can apply in this area. So how does it kind of what can you do to create a structured process to help your organization adopt this more effectively, use it without, all the bad things that you talked about happening, right? Morale, security risk, copyright, legal issues, all that stuff. So you want to do this right. So how does change management help you get there?
So I think first and foremost, I think the worst thing that you can do is you do want to set goals and objectives. You want to have KPIs and OKRs, objectives and key results and goals to achieve of how it can improve efficiency, how it can improve productivity in the organization. But the worst thing that I think you could do is to roll those out to the individuals. So if you simply go to somebody who's, someone in the organization might be responsible for writing blogs or doing social media posts and tell them, hey, we're going to train you on AI. You're going to start using it, and we expect to get, 2, 3, 5x more out of you. That is not a good approach. I completely would disagree with doing anything like that. That's going to create a lot of anxiety. It's going to create a lot of fear. So you want to create a safe environment first and foremost. I also think that you need to have those clear guidelines in place, right, and policies to make sure that you're monitoring what is being done. You've got some checks and balances in place to make sure that anybody can't just do anything, right? And so you need to really think about that. But one approach that you can do, that's been used in like rolling out software or enterprise software, or pretty much, could be any sort of major process in an organization, is to have designate either one or multiple, depending on the size of the organization, change agents, right? So basically super users. So enable someone, at least one person, to really be able to go deep and to spend a significant amount of time to go experiment and to learn. Okay. Allow everybody to experiment and to use it in their jobs to a certain extent, but have those individuals be able to go off and really experiment and test out in a safe place where they can't really do any damage and try to figure out like what's going to work. A good approach that I would recommend is to conduct like a thought experiment or exercise with your marketing organization. So one thing you could do, so like back up for a second. First of all, the efficiency and speed of any process is limited by the number of steps and the constraints in that process. So one thing you could do is to conduct a thought experiment, right? Do a working session with your team. And if you could kind of come in and basically take away any constraints, any obligations, any goals, any commitments that you need to have to the organization. And you look at your major processes in marketing. And if you could start over today, knowing what you know already, and you could overhaul those processes, what would you change? Right? Have the team kind of go through that, identify their top 3 to 5, right? Put those up on the whiteboard, use sticky notes, right? And then have everybody vote on that or determine what are the top 3 to 5 or even one that you want to focus on. What process could you make better? It could be campaign creation. It could be how are you enabling and providing content, working with your BDRs, right? You name it. It could be how do you go about planning and executing on events. If you could look at that process as if it was sort of your first day walking in the organization, right? Which ones would you focus on to change? And then you can look at, okay, what aspect of those processes could we simplify? And so you might just, without the use of AI, just identify steps that are necessary, right? They're there for a reason, but it could have happened organically of why they get introduced into that process. But most importantly, what steps could be automated through AI, right? And what could be streamlined and create more efficiency. Identify those either in that one or that top 3 to 5 processes that you want to work on, and then designate those change agents, create a small team and go work on that and experiment, right? Go test it out, get some feedback on it, see what the results are. And once you identify a better process, then you can institutionalize it and you can roll it out across the organization. And then you can just start chipping away at that. So go to the next one, go to the next one. Okay. And that's a way to sort of do it in an incremental way where you've kind of tested it out and you've experimented, but you've taken a step back and you just didn't take a peanut butter approach to taking AI and say, hey, we're going to jam AI and we're going to try to use whatever tools we can to try to make this process more efficient or better, because a bad process is a bad process, even if you add AI to it.
It strikes me that some marketing organizations think in terms of process, right? And so some marketing organizations, have steps and checklists and kind of know what they're doing. But a lot of marketing folks are experts and they don't think necessarily in terms of process. So not all organizations have like a systematic process for writing something or even creating, the email newsletter or posting new content on the website or doing, a new SEO program or creating a new ad campaign. They're kind of experts who know how to do these things based on years of experience. They're especially in the creative realm, they're kind of, creatives who know how to do that. And so what you're describing is a need to kind of think through the steps of those processes and document all of that so that you can figure out really how to become more effective. Do you think marketing organizations are ready for that level of process documentation?
That's a good question. I think that, as you pointed out, some are, but others maybe not. And that's where overcoming, they should, right? You should try to systemize every process that you possibly can. It's going to make you that more efficient, even without implementing or introducing AI to it. But there's going to be a lot of resistance to change to that, right? Because there's going to be fear that if I document my process, my expertise, and I turn that, systemize it, document the process, then potentially I could be replaced. Somebody else could come in and just follow that process. So there's going to be definitely resistance to that. And because marketing is, of all the disciplines in a business, the most creative, right? There are many people are just not used to working in that way. So absolutely agree that there's probably going to be a lot of resistance, and some organizations are not ready for it. And so that's where robust change management comes into place. There's something called Glacius formula, which is it's kind of an academic construct to just really think about how to implement change. It's just a good tool to help you understand what you need to do. And it goes like this. It's basically the current dissatisfaction or the pain that you're feeling times the vision that you have times the first step needs to be greater than the resistance. to overcome that, to implement change.
Hmm.
And how that works is, the resistance to putting processes in place or even implementing AI as part of that is probably going to be greater than what you think. So it's important to really uncover how people truly feel about doing this. And if say on a scale of 1 to 5, if the resistance to change, you think it's a 2, it's probably a 3 or a 4, right? It's always going to be deeper than you really expect, because people aren't going to express how they truly feel about it. You might have a few people who do that. But particularly in the case of AI, like what we talked about before, generative AI, like how is this going to change and how is this going to affect my role? So assume it's always greater. And then what you need to do is really understand what's the current pain that you're feeling in the organization. Today's marketing world, right? It's always about, as you know, we talked about this before, David, right? It's like you can't create enough, fast enough, or good enough, right? It's always more. It's always the marketer's job is never done. It's like create more content, create better content, create more leads, do it faster, right? Do it better. And by the way, you never have enough people and you don't have enough budget, right? So that's really the pain. So how do you create more efficiency in what you do and in your processes? Okay. And you want to really uncover that and expose that to your organization, right? Make sure people understand that and they'll feel it, they'll know it, they'll see it. The next part is really key, and that is the vision. What is the vision that you have for creating processes and then institutionalizing generative AI? How is that going to impact the marketing organization? How is it going to improve what you do? It's not just about efficiency and doing more, but how is it going to improve the work, the quality of work, the quality of life of everybody in the marketing organization, and tie that back up to the company's goals and objectives? How's it going to affect the business in a positive way? And you need to articulate that extremely well. You need to be very clear. It needs to be repetitive. You have to say it over and over, and you have to make sure that your people really understand that, believe it, and they can feel it. And then the third part, or what's the first step that you need to take? Okay, so that first step needs to be simple enough that it feels achievable, but it also needs to be strong enough that it will be impactful. And you need to articulate that as well. And so those three things sort of give you a way to think about what do you need to do to overcome that massive resistance that you're probably going to have to implement a procedural way, or systematic way to go about marketing, and to also implement generative AI as part of those processes.
Yeah. And I think it really does start with the vision. And I think that's the piece that I'm not seeing yet, but maybe that's the piece that you're helping clients in your work kind of get to. Like, what is the vision we're trying to achieve here? And it feels like right now we're just kind of dabbling with a few things to make our jobs a little easier. But the vision might be more like we want to produce 3x the amount of content, or we want content for every buyer persona across the whole buying cycle for every product and service in every language, for every geography, every industry. And that's going to take a massive amount of effort. And we can only achieve that through AI, something like that. So I think that but you're right. You have to kind of start with that vision. I wonder if there's another thing that's happening though in with AI, and it's a different type of change management where when we see this at our organization, I see this with clients, is individuals are starting to use AI on an individual level, and it's making them much happier and much more productive, and they're using it all the time. They're just not telling their boss. They're like, yeah, this thing that I was supposed to take 8 hours to do, it took me like 15 minutes. And so, yeah, I'm okay not telling my boss that, right? So is that happening too? Is there a change management thing that has to happen to say, we really need you. If it's really taking you 15 minutes, we need you to produce instead of 8 hours, we need you to produce 20 times as much, or you don't have a job here. So is that a piece of
Yeah.
it? People are kind of like, oh yeah, this AI thing is unbelievably great. I'm not telling anybody. So how do you deal with that in change management?
That's a really good point. And I think you're absolutely right. Like I'm a solopreneur now, right? So it's just me. Generative AI has been a game changer. for me, right? Creating blog content, creating LinkedIn posts, creating graphics, and I'm just scratching the surface on what's possible. I know there's so much more there, and I want to keep it to myself, right? I don't want to tell anybody, right? It's kind of like it's my little secret advantage, and that's like natural human nature to do that. Like we don't want to share our secrets, right? Because then we won't have our competitive advantage anymore. So I think the way to do that, it kind of goes back to, I think it's a major mistake to set individual goals to be more productive with the use of it, right? But I do think what you absolutely want to do, because that doesn't create a safe environment. That is just going to give people a lot of anxiety, and put more pressure and more stress on them. And then eventually, you're gonna get what you ask for. You're gonna get more content, but the quality will be lower. People, ultimately leave and so on. So you don't want to do that, but you want to reward people for for innovation. So you want to create, I think, a safe environment, right, where they can experiment, and they can test new things with guardrails, so they don't, break anything or do anything disastrous for their organization. And then put rewards in place for those people who bring forth the best innovations in AI, like reward them for it. It's like anything else. They're not going to be penalized. They're not going to be given, more work. It's not going to be like, sales quota. It's like, oh, great, you busted your sales quota this quarter. Guess what? Next quarter, like, it's 1.5 times that, right? That's the wrong approach. So you just want to make it safe, and you want to encourage them, putting rewards in recognition in place for discovering and finding those innovations.
Yeah,
and it's people management, right? So it comes down to the basics.
Yeah, and then from there, you want to take what they're learning and roll it out, document the learning, create better process and systems, train everybody so you've got real process. Well, so what I hear you saying is keys are really safe environment, change agents, guardrails, and rewards, and then that whole the training and the process and systems. Very powerful, but hard to do, right? So it takes a very structured, disciplined approach to leadership to make that happen. Where should we look for examples to make that happen? Because you've talked about like that happened, in software implementation, and are there disciplines that really led the way that we should look for, or is this whole idea of change management, so well understood that people should just look to that as a set of guidelines and strategies to help achieve that?
I think change management, from like it's a topic that's been around for a long time. If you look at any of the major consultancies, you can find tons of information or expertise and thought leadership around this from McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, all the major consulting houses. You can find a lot out there. I think it's the same. It's a new technology, right? It has significant implications, but it's moving fast. I think those basic concepts that have been used for a long time really apply to implementing AI. And there are great examples out there that you can find, where there are organizations that have really done a phenomenal job at implementing and institutionalizing it.
That's great. Well, Jason, you've got a lot of expertise in this area. If people want to reach out to you and learn more about your services and how you can help them in this area, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, first and foremost, you can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Jason C. Mundy. You can also email me at jmundy@focalpointcoaching.com. That's really the best way. One of those two. If you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm going to respond to you. If you email me, I'll get back to you as well.
That's great. Jason, thanks for taking the time. It's a great conversation. And I think that we have a lot more to think about with change management and AI. So we can continue this conversation, but I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you for having me again, David. It was great to talk to you again. Thank you.